December 9th, 1967, Oakland, California. A night that changed everything, and yet changed nothing at all. A night the people who were there never forgot. A night Bruce Lee never mentioned in public, not once. This is the story I was warned never to tell. In December 1967, Bruce Lee was just 27 years old. To most of America, he was nobody. No hit movies, no TV fame, no magazine covers. He ran a small martial arts school in Oakland's Chinatown. A handful of students, a style most Americans had never even heard of, Wing Chun, but altered, reshaped, and sharpened by Bruce's own ideas. To 99% of people, his name meant nothing. But in certain back rooms, in certain gyms, in quiet circles where fighters tested themselves away from rules and referees, his name carried weight. People spoke about him in a strange tone, part respect, part disbelief. They said he moved like water. They said his punches were too fast to follow. They said he was building something new, something beyond traditional martial arts. He called it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. It wasn't just a fighting style, it was a philosophy. No fixed forms, no rigid traditions, no fancy rituals. Only what works, only what's real. But at that time, these were just stories. He gave demonstrations at small tournaments. He impressed local crowds. Fighters whispered about him between rounds. Yet no one had seen him in a true fight. Not the kind where reputation disappears. Not the kind where survival is the only goal. Not the kind with no rules, no referee, no protection. Until December 9th, 1967. I first heard about that night in 1996. I was interviewing Dan Inosanto, one of Bruce Lee's closest students and friends, for a book I was writing. We had been talking for hours. The official interview was finished. The recorder was off. We were just sitting there with coffee, sharing memories about a man we both admired. Then Dan said something that made my stomach drop. "There was a fight," he said quietly, staring into his cup. "A real one. The only real one I ever saw Bruce in." He paused. His hand trembled slightly. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It never should have happened." "How many people saw it?" I asked. He looked up at me. His eyes had changed. There was something heavy in them. "7," he said. "Only 7. And Bruce made us swear we'd never talk about it." "Why?" I asked. Dan, a man I had known for years, who had always spoken about Bruce with warmth and pride, looked afraid. "Because of what it showed," he said softly, "about who he really was, about what he was capable of, about how far he would go." He wouldn't tell me everything that day, but he gave me a name, one of the other witnesses, and before he left, he warned me, "If you decide to dig into this, understand something. This is not a heroic story. This isn't Bruce beating some villain. This is darker than that, much darker." It took me 6 years to track down all 7 witnesses. 2 had already passed away. 1 refused to speak to me at all, even after I flew to Hong Kong to meet him. He opened the door, saw my notes in my hands, and said just one sentence, "I have nothing to say about that night." Then he closed the door. But 4 of them agreed to talk. Slowly, carefully, with long silences, with visible discomfort. When I compared their accounts, detail by detail, I realized Dan had been right. This wasn't a story of glory. It was the story of what happens when a man who has trained his entire life in combat finally uses everything he knows, not for sport, not for demonstration, not for teaching, but for real. The man who challenged Bruce Lee was no fool. Let me make that clear.
He wasn't some drunk looking for trouble. He wasn't an amateur with big dreams. He wasn't a student trying to prove himself. He was a professional, a fighter with 15 years of experience in places where losing meant more than embarrassment. It meant broken bones, ruined careers, sometimes worse. I cannot share his real name, so I will call him what the witnesses called him, the Russian. They didn't call him the Russian only because of where he came from, though that was part of it. They called him because of how he fought. His style was harsh, practical, and built for survival, a system shaped inside Soviet military training programs, a mix of brutal hand-to-hand combat, grappling similar to Sambo, and real street experience where mistakes carried serious consequences. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't theatrical, he was efficient. 34 years old, 6'2", around 220 pounds of dense muscle earned through training sessions that would send most men to the hospital. He had competed in underground fights on 3 continents. According to one witness who had connections in those circles, his record stood at 47 wins and only 2 losses, both early in his career. For 8 years he hadn't lost at all. By late 1967, he had established himself in certain hidden corners of the Bay Area. Not in legal arenas, not in public tournaments. These were warehouse fights, basement matches, money changing hands quietly. And he had heard the stories about Bruce Lee. The lightning speed, the famous 1-inch punch, the demonstrations that left seasoned martial artists speechless. The Russian didn't believe any of it. To him, Bruce was a showman, a skilled performer in controlled environments. Impressive, yes, but untested in real combat. He had faced traditional martial artists before, beautiful techniques that collapsed the moment chaos entered the room. He didn't want to injure Bruce. He didn't want to embarrass him. He wanted to test him, to see if the legend was real. So he sent a challenge. Exactly how the message reached Bruce depends on who you ask. The details vary, but the core story matches across all witnesses. In late November 1967, word reached Bruce through mutual contacts in the Bay Area martial arts community. The Russian wanted a private fight. No tournament, no crowd, no referee, no time limit. Just 2 men and the truth. When the message arrived, James Lee, one of Bruce's senior students, was present. Bruce read it carefully, folded it, placed it in his pocket. "Aren't you going to respond?" James asked. Bruce looked at him calmly. "I already did." James frowned. "How?" "By not answering immediately," Bruce said. "That tells him I'm thinking." And for 2 weeks, Bruce gave no reply. The Russian sent another message, then another, each one more direct, more persistent. Finally, on December 4th, 1965, Bruce agreed, but on his terms. Bruce's conditions revealed exactly how seriously he was taking this.
The location would be neutral, not a gym, not a dojo. No more than 7 witnesses, 3 chosen by Bruce, 3 by the Russian, 1 neutral observer. No weapons, no biting, no eye gouging. Everything else allowed. The fight would continue until one man could no longer continue or verbally surrendered. No photos, no recordings, no publicity, no matter the outcome. And then came the final condition. If either man was seriously injured or killed, everyone present would claim it was a training accident. No police, no investigation, nothing beyond what happened inside that room. The Russian agreed to every term. The neutral observer was a former military combat instructor named Robert. He had no loyalty to either fighter. I interviewed Robert in 2004. He was 71 then, sharp memory, calm voice. "I've seen a lot of fights. Military trials, early full-contact matches before they had names, street fights that ended in ambulances. He paused, but I had never seen anything like that night. The location was an abandoned industrial building in West Oakland, scheduled for demolition in early 1968. Concrete floors, high ceilings, one large open space, about 40 by 40 feet. A single skylight let cold December moonlight spill across the room. Every sound echoed, every breath, every step, every impact. They arrived separately around 11 p.m. Bruce came with James Lee and Dan Inosanto. The Russian brought two men whose names I never learned. Robert arrived alone. It felt illegal, Dan later told me, which it technically was, but it felt like more than that, like we were crossing a line. Bruce wore simple black pants and a black t-shirt, barefoot, nothing to grab. The Russian wore gray pants and a gray shirt, also barefoot. No handshake, no bow. They stood at opposite ends of the room, studying each other with cold precision. Robert stepped forward. "You both understand the conditions?" Both nodded. "You both agree?" "Yes," said the Russian. "Yes," said Bruce, quietly. Robert stepped back. "Begin when ready." Neither man moved. This was the moment every witness remembered most clearly. 40 feet apart, completely still. 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Dan later said, "I'd never seen Bruce that still. Before demonstrations, he'd loosen up, shift his weight. That night, nothing, like a statue." The Russian moved first. He didn't charge, he didn't rush, he advanced slowly, professionally, the way a man moves when he has survived 47 real fights. Hands loose, weight balanced, testing the concrete beneath him. 40 feet became 30. 30 became 20. Bruce didn't move. 15 feet away, the Russian subtly shifted rhythm, a slight change in pace, a tiny adjustment of the hands. Preparation. And then Bruce moved. Not backward, forward. 3 explosive steps, incredibly fast. In a blink, he closed the distance the Russian had carefully built. Bruce's lead hand touched the Russian's forehead, not a punch, just fingertips, light, precise. And then Bruce was gone. Back again, 15 feet away. The room went silent. Robert later told me my mind couldn't process it. 1 second he was still, the next he was touching him, then he was back again. It felt like frames were missing. The Russian slowly touched his own forehead. He understood. Bruce had just said, "I can reach you whenever I want." But the Russian did not survive 47 fights by giving up. He attacked. A powerful straight punch down the center line, full commitment. Bruce slipped it by inches. A hook followed to the body. Bruce wasn't there. Another punch, another. Fast, skilled, dangerous. Every strike cut through empty air. Bruce wasn't blocking, Dan said. He just wasn't there. Minimal movement, perfect timing. Frustration crept into the Russian's rhythm. His technique began to crack. Then Bruce countered. A low kick, fast and sharp to the lead leg above the knee. The crack echoed. The Russian's leg buckled. In that half second of imbalance, Bruce stepped inside. 3 strikes. Solar plexus, ribs, jaw. Then he was out again, 5 feet away, hands down, breathing steady. The Russian staggered. Blood touched his lips. "That's when I saw it," Robert said. The realization. He had never fought anyone like this. The Russian spit blood onto the concrete, reset his stance. He was hurt, but not done. What happened next unfolded so fast the witnesses disagree on exact order. The Russian changed strategy. If he couldn't hit Bruce, he would grab him. He lunged, hands reaching. This was dangerous. He was trained in Sambo, Soviet grappling meant to break joints and end fights on the ground. Bruce evaded, barely. One hand caught Bruce's wrist for a fraction of a second. Iron grip. The Russian began pulling him into close range, where weight and size would matter. Then Bruce did something none of them had ever seen. He moved into the grab, not away, into it. His free hand struck the Russian's elbow, precise, surgical. There was a sharp pop. The joint hyperextended. The grip released instantly. The Russian stepped back, cradling his arm. Pain showed clearly now. James thought it was over, but the Russian looked at his damaged arm, then at Bruce, and something in his eyes changed. He wasn't stopping. He switched to his other arm, attacked again. Now it was less technique, more raw violence, punches mixed with kicks, desperation creeping in. Bruce blocked a kick, trapped the leg, swept the standing foot. The Russian crashed onto the concrete. The sound echoed through the building. But he rolled instantly, fighter's instinct, never stay down. He rose in a crouch, breathing hard, blood dripping onto the floor. Bruce stood 5 feet away, calm, controlled. Then Bruce spoke, the first words since the fight began. "Stop." The Russian shook his head and stood. "I know you're hurt," said Bruce softly. His voice carried clearly. "Your arm is damaged. Your ribs are cracked. You're bleeding inside. I can see it." A pause. "This is finished."